The metallic click of crutches against concrete echoed through the crowded military ceremony as Staff Sergeant Maria Santos made her way toward the front row. Behind her, she could hear the whispered comments and barely concealed snickers from a group of young Rangers. "Look at that," one muttered. "They're letting anyone into these events now." Another added with cruel amusement, "Probably some desk jockey who thinks she belongs with real soldiers." Maria's jaw tightened, but she kept walking, her silver sniper badge catching the morning sunlight, a badge that told a story none of these men could imagine. Little did they know, they were looking at one of the most lethal marksmen in military history, a woman whose steady hands had saved countless lives from impossible distances before that final mission in Afghanistan changed everything. In just moments, their laughter would turn to stunned silence, and every Ranger in that crowd would be standing at attention. The morning sun cast long shadows across the Veterans Hospital parking lot as Maria Santos carefully maneuvered herself out of her adapted Honda Civic. The familiar weight of her forearm crutches felt steady in her grip. These titanium companions had been with her for 3 years now, ever since that October morning in the mountains of Afghanistan changed everything. She adjusted her dress blue uniform, the fabric crisp despite the early hour, and began the measured walk toward the entrance. Inside the hospital corridors, Maria noticed the usual reactions. Nurses offered sympathetic smiles, orderlies stepped aside with awkward politeness, and visiting family members glanced away quickly, unsure how to process a decorated soldier who needed assistance to walk. She'd grown accustomed to these responses, though they still stung. What they saw was limitation. What they missed was the story behind the silver badge, adorning her chest, particularly the gleaming sniper qualification badge that few truly understood. Staff Sergeant Maria Santos hadn't always needed crutches. Just 4 years ago, she was scaling mountain ridges in full combat gear, carrying a 50-pound pack and her trusted M24 sniper rifle across impossible terrain. Her fellow soldiers called her Ghost because of her ability to remain motionless for hours, invisible to enemy forces while protecting American lives from distances that seemed mythical. In the unforgiving landscapes of Afghanistan, Maria had recorded over 200 confirmed kills, each one a calculated decision that saved coalition forces from ambush, protected convoys from IED attacks, and kept her brothers and sisters in arms breathing. Her reputation preceded her wherever the 82nd Airborne deployed. Commanding officers specifically requested her for the most dangerous missions, knowing that Maria's presence on Overwatch meant their troops would come home. She could thread a bullet through a 6-inch gap at 800 meters, account for wind speed, temperature, and elevation changes that would confuse seasoned marksmen. But more than her technical skills, Maria possessed something that couldn't be taught: an unshakable calm under pressure, and an absolute commitment to protecting American lives. The turning point came during Operation Mountain Thunder, a classified mission in the Korangal Valley that intelligence reports later called one of the most complex enemy ambushes of the entire Afghan conflict. Maria's unit was tasked with providing security for a humanitarian convoy delivering medical supplies to a remote village. What should have been a routine protection detail became a nightmare when over 60 Taliban fighters launched a coordinated attack from elevated positions surrounding the convoy route. From her concealed position on a Roki, Kai outcrop 1,200 meters away, Maria watched through her scope as enemy fire pinned down 3 trucks of Marines and medical personnel. The convoy commander's voice crackled through her radio with increasing desperation. "Ghost, we need immediate suppression fire on the northern ridge. We've got wounded and can't move." Maria's training took over. For the next 47 minutes, she systematically eliminated enemy positions, her shots precise and devastating. Each squeeze of the trigger meant another American soldier would see home again. But the Taliban had learned to fear the Ghost. A spotter had identified her position, and as Maria focused on neutralizing the final enemy machine gun nest, she never saw the rocket-propelled grenades streaking toward her rocky perch. The explosion threw her 15 feet down the mountainside, her left leg shattered beyond surgical repair, her right leg severely damaged, and her back compressed by the impact against granite rocks. As consciousness faded, her last clear thought wasn't about her own condition. It was relief that the convoy was moving safely toward the village. The evacuation helicopter found Maria still clutching her rifle, semi-conscious but attempting to maintain overwatch on the convoy's route. Medics later said they'd never seen someone so severely injured continue trying to complete their mission. The official report credited Staff Sergeant Santos with neutralizing 23 enemy combatants and directly saving the lives of 42 American service members. Her actions that day earned her the Silver Star, the Bronze Star with Valor, and the Purple Heart. But what mattered most to Maria was a simple radio transmission she heard while being loaded onto the medevac. "Tell Ghost we all made it home, every single one of us." 3 years of recovery followed. Surgeries, physical therapy, psychological counseling, and the gradual acceptance that her body would never again carry her across mountain ranges in pursuit of America's enemies. The doctors at Walter Reed Medical Center had been brutally honest. Extensive nerve damage and bone loss meant she would require mobility assistance for life. But they hadn't counted on Maria's resilience, the same mental toughness that had kept her motionless in sniper hides for 18-hour stretches. She learned to navigate stairs with crutches, adapted her driving technique, and slowly rebuilt her strength. The hardest part wasn't the physical limitations, it was the way people looked at her now. Instead of seeing a warrior who had served with distinction, they saw disability first. Fellow veterans at support group meetings understood, but civilian society struggled to reconcile the image of a decorated sniper with someone who needed assistance walking. Today was different, though. Today, Maria was attending the annual Army Ranger Recognition Ceremony at Fort Bragg, where her former unit would be honored for their continued service in Afghanistan. She'd received a special invitation from Colonel Mitchell, her old commanding officer, who insisted her presence would mean everything to the young Rangers who had never heard the stories of Operation Mountain Thunder. As Maria drove toward the base, her dress uniform pressed and her decorations polished, she wondered if these new soldiers would understand that heroism comes in many forms. The base gates appeared ahead, and Maria felt the familiar mixture of pride and melancholy that came with returning to military installations. This was where she belonged, among warriors who understood sacrifice and service. Today, she would stand with her brothers and sisters in arms, crutches and all, because being a soldier had never been about perfect legs, it had always been about perfect aim and an unbreakable spirit. The ceremony grounds at Fort Bragg buzzed with pre-event energy as hundreds of soldiers, families, and distinguished guests gathered for the annual Ranger recognition. Maria arrived early, wanting to avoid the crowds and find a suitable spot where her crutches wouldn't obstruct others' views. She made her way toward the front section reserved for decorated veterans, each step deliberate and measured. Her dress blue uniform drew respectful nods from older veterans who recognized the significance of her decorations, but she noticed a group of young Rangers near the back making less respectful observations. "Check out the cripple trying to sit with the real soldiers," one voice carried further than intended. Another Ranger, barely old enough to have completed his first deployment, added with cruel humor, "Probably some supply clerk who thinks her participation trophy makes her special." The group's laughter stung, but Maria had heard worse during her recovery. She found her assigned seat in the second row and settled in, placing her crutches carefully beside her chair. Colonel Mitchell took the podium as the ceremony began, his weathered face serious as he addressed the assembled crowd. "Today we honor not just current Rangers, but the legacy of extraordinary service that defines our brotherhood," he announced. "We're particularly honored to have with us veterans whose actions in combat exemplify the Ranger creed. I will never leave a fallen comrade." His eyes found Maria in the crowd, and she felt a flutter of nervousness. She hadn't expected to be singled out. The first part of the ceremony proceeded with standard military precision, unit citations, deployment recognitions, and promotions. But Maria noticed Colonel Mitchell checking his notes frequently, building towards something significant. Behind her, the same group of young Rangers continued their commentary, apparently assuming she couldn't hear them. "Look at her trying to look important," one whispered. "Bet she never fired a shot in anger." Another added, "Probably got he. Her medals for typing reports really fast." Colonel Mitchell's voice suddenly commanded absolute attention. "Today we have a very special presentation that I believe will remind every Ranger here why we never judge a warrior by their appearance." He gestured toward Maria. "Staff Sergeant Maria Santos, please join me at the podium." The crowd fell silent as Maria rose carefully, her crutches clicking against the concrete as she made her way forward. Behind her, She could hear confused murmurs from the young rangers who had been mocking her. 3 years ago, Colonel Mitchell continued as Maria reached the platform, Staff Sergeant Santos performed one of the most extraordinary acts of valor in recent military history. He began reading from an official citation, his voice carrying across the hushed crowd. During Operation Mountain Thunder in Afghanistan's Korangal Valley, Staff Sergeant Santos single-handedly neutralized 23 enemy combatants from an elevated position 1,200 meters from the target area, directly saving the lives of 42 American service members under intense fire. The transformation in the crowd was immediate and visible. The young rangers who had been laughing minutes earlier now sat in stunned silence, their faces reflecting a mixture of shame and growing respect. Colonel Mitchell continued. Her actions allowed a trapped medical convoy to complete their humanitarian mission and evacuate wounded personnel. She maintained overwatch even after sustaining severe injuries from an enemy RPG attack, continuing her mission until confirmed that every American had reached safety. Maria stood quietly beside the podium, uncomfortable with the attention but understanding its importance. She could see recognition dawning on faces throughout the crowd as they processed the reality of who they had been dismissing. The silver sniper badge on her chest caught the sunlight, and suddenly its significance became clear to everyone present. This wasn't just any veteran. This was a legend they had all heard about in whispered stories around training camps. The soldier you see before you, Colonel Mitchell's voice grew stronger, holds the record for the longest confirmed kill shot by a female sniper in U.S. military history, 1,427 meters in mountainous terrain under combat conditions. She has been awarded the Silver Star, Bronze Star with Valor, Purple Heart, and Combat Action Badge. Rangers, I present to you the ghost of Korangal Valley. The silence that followed was profound and reverent. Then slowly, one young ranger in the back stood up. His movement created a ripple effect as others rose, understanding finally dawning on their faces. Within seconds, every ranger in the ceremony, from fresh-faced privates to grizzled sergeants major, was standing at attention. The respect in their eyes was unmistakable, their earlier mockery replaced by genuine admiration for a warrior who had sacrificed everything for her brothers and sisters in arms. Maria felt tears threatening as she looked out at the sea of standing soldiers. This was what she had missed most during her recovery, not the adrenaline of combat or the technical challenge of long-range shooting, but the brotherhood, the mutual respect among warriors who understood sacrifice. Colonel Mitchell handed her the microphone, and despite her preference for remaining out of the spotlight, she knew these young rangers needed to hear her words. 3 years ago, I could run 5 miles in full gear and scale mountains that would challenge experienced climbers, Maria began, her voice steady despite the emotion she felt. Today, I need crutches to walk to the grocery store. But I want every young ranger here to understand something crucial. Being a warrior has never been about perfect legs or perfect bodies. It's about perfect commitment, and to the soldiers standing beside you. She paused, looking directly at the group that had been mocking her. Every one of you has the potential to be the person others depend on when everything goes wrong. Don't ever let anyone convince you that warriors look a certain way. As Maria made her way back to her seat, the standing ovation continued. But what moved her most was seeing the young rangers who had been laughing at her crutches now approaching with genuine respect, asking about her service and apologizing for their earlier comments. One private, barely 18 years old, saluted her formally and said, "Ma'am, I'm sorry, we didn't know. Thank you for your service and your sacrifice." The ceremony concluded with the traditional ranger toast, but Maria knew the real victory had been in education, showing these young warriors that heroism comes in many forms, and that the measure of a soldier is never their physical condition, but their willingness to serve something greater than themselves. As she drove home that evening, Maria smiled, knowing that her story would be told and retold among rangers for years to come. A reminder that legends don't always look the way we expect them to. The crutches that had once been symbols of limitation became symbols of resilience that day at Fort Bragg. Maria Santos proved that true warriors are defined not by their physical capabilities, but by their unbreakable spirit and unwavering commitment to protecting others. Her story reminds us that heroes walk among us every day, often unrecognized, carrying the invisible scars of service while maintaining the strength to inspire the next generation of protectors. The young rangers who learned Maria's identity that day carried her story forward, sharing it with new recruits and ensuring that the legend of the ghost of Korangal Valley would continue inspiring American warriors for generations to come. They learned that respect must be earned, not assumed, and that the most powerful weapons are often carried by those who have paid the highest price for their expertise. If this story of courage, sacrifice, and hidden heroism moved you, please subscribe to our channel for more inspiring tales of America's military heroes. These men and women have given everything to protect our freedom, and their stories deserve to be told, shared, and remembered. Honor their service by keeping their legacy alive. Hit that subscribe button and join us in celebrating the extraordinary courage of ordinary people who chose to serve something greater than themselves.